Hi guys and welcome back to TomTalks. Today this is just going to be a quickie because I've realised I didn't complete my 2021 list, so I'm going to quickly go through them now. Let's get into it, shall we? Straight away. We're not going to do a list, I'm just going to go through the 10 albums that I thought were the worst of 2021. I didn't get to all of them, all the albums that I could have done that could have made this list. I think Tones and I's album is one that probably would have made this list if I'd listened to it, but I haven't, so here we go. Let's start with DJ Khaled, Khaled. As you will have seen in my small talks, I will link small talks at the end because most of the albums on this list will be there. But Khaled is like continued the decline in DJ Khaled's quality of music. And this album definitely did that. There was a lot of bad stuff on it. The I Did It track with Post Malone and Megan Thee Stallion really destroyed a rip-off of a classic rock song. The track with Justin Timberlake wasn't very good. Even the track with Nas and Jay-Z on it sucked. There was a couple of tracks at the end I liked, but this album, for the most part, was pretty bad. And the tracks with Drake were also not great. Either one of them was like a glorified Weeknd rip-off. Yeah, hopefully the next DJ Khaled album will be better. Girl in Red, If I Could Make It Go Quiet. She made my worst songs of the year list, and this album certainly did that. This album for me was quite cringe. It was a bit over the top. It was quite obnoxious. The sort of, oh, wow, wow, and you stupid bitch, like songs like that just, this album was just, it was really not for me. It was very over the top, and it's not what I was looking for in a sort of pop punk, sort of alternative rock sort of album, really. The Fratellis, Half Drunk Under a Full Moon. The Fratellis had some great tracks back in the day. They don't on this album. This album's very dull. It's very boring. There's not really much to say about this album. There's nothing here that was offensive like the other two albums I've just mentioned, but this album was just so boring and so predictable and one note. It's a shame, really, because bands, they have their career high point and then they just drop off massively towards the end of their career. And yeah, it's a shame because this album was very, very boring. Alice Cooper, Detroit Stories. Alice Cooper, obviously a famous rock legend. Not on this album. This album felt very dated. It felt like he's not really moved on from his original sound at all. Some stuff here wasn't terrible, but for the most part this album was just not great listen. It felt very of its time, very unoriginal, and even the most die-hard Alice Cooper fans I think would find a hard time getting any reason to get this out again, to be honest. Another album that's like that is Paul Weather's Fat Pop. Never been a massive Paul Weather fan anyway, but Fat Pop just, it's bloated. I can give it that. It's bloated, full of dull, boring, outdated pop music. There's not too much I could say about this album. It's just kind of take what I said about Alice Cooper, but just reimagine it for a pop album, I guess. Kings of Leon, When You See Yourself. I liked the Bandit. I think the leading track for this project. But for the most part, this was very dull, very boring, very predictable. I feel like I've kind of said the same things about a lot of these albums, but that's kind of where things are coming from. Like, Kings of Leon definitely still have talent there, but they just didn't try anything different or adventurous on this project. And I've not been massive on their recent material, but at least their other albums sort of had some enjoyable jams here and there. This album, not much of that going on here, really. YUNGBLUD-weird. I've never really understood the appeal of YUNGBLUD. I think he's kind of generic. I don't think he's doing anything that different. I think he feels like he's doing something different, but he's not. And this album was just very dull, very predictable. There wasn't really any tracks here I liked. There were some tracks that sort of I could tolerate, but for the most part, this was a very predictable, boring, non-original album. And YUNGBLUD, now and again, will do something interesting, like on that KSI song, Patience, where he'd had a good verse, but for for the most part, I don't see the appeal of this guy. Drake, Certified Lover Boy. Oh, this had a lot of bad tracks on it. Girls Want Girls is, of course, cringe. I don't need to tell you why. I've told you about the line. The song where he's on about mum's not at home, daddy's not at home is weird. Fucking Fans is not a great track either. It's just, there's a lot of tracks on this album where just Drake is not trying at all, and like for example with Girls Want Girls, like Drake sounds sort of like monotone, and then Lil Baby just comes in and it's just like, you don't really match the track, but I at least admire you've tried on this song. And yeah, like the first two tracks of that album gave me a false impression this album might be okay, but nah, it was bad. And of course, the Way Too Sexy track, which is very, very cringe, and there's a reason why it made my worst tracks of the year list. We're almost done now, thankfully. Maroon 5, Geordie. Maroon 5 really aren't trying anymore. I mean, it's basically Adam Levine anyway. They just collaborate with people and hope for the best. I mean, the Megan Thee Stallion track I actually think is pretty decent. I actually like that track, but like they did a song with Stevie Nicks of Fleetwood Mac. You would have thought that one would have been at least good, but no, it was rubbish. There's that remix with Nipsey Hussle and Juice WRLD, which just feels so out of place. And there's so many things wrong with Geordie, and you have to hope that Maroon 5 will either pack it in soon or they'll try and make good music again. Who knows? This album did kind of bad, so maybe they'll realise. And finally, the worst album of the year, in my opinion, is by the pop-punk band The Offspring with Let the Bad Times Roll. And this album was certainly a bad time. I hated listening to this album. It was really bad. It was horrible to listen to. I even had a headache at one point, I think. I don't really like anything about this. I'm not as in tune with the Offspring's back catalogue, but this album was just bad from start to finish. It was really awful, and for me it's the worst album of 2021 in my opinion. That is the worst albums of 2021. I hope you've got some enjoyment from this. I've enjoyed doing this video. I've not enjoyed looking back at these terrible albums, but we'll be having more of these coming up soon because I've got best songs and best albums to do, so keep an eye on those. But until next time, this has been another TomTalks.